Hi, It Girls. We're back with the It Girls Guide. And today we have a special guest. He's only special because he's a man and we haven't had a man on the podcast yet. But my good friend, Matthew Tamasi.
Hello, Richie.
How are you?
Fantastic.
Are you nervous?
I'm not. You have a nice calming presence, so
Oh, good.
I'm chilling.
And I'm going to ask him some hard questions. I'm just kidding. We're going to talk today about dating and dating apps because Matt is going to be kind of our in-house male perspective on dating. That's kind of your brand, right?
It is. All of my content is somehow related to dating.
Yeah.
The ups and downs, the trials and tribulations.
Yeah, I think, one, I always start with telling people how I met my guests. So we met at the dog park in Williamsburg. And I always tell my girlfriends, if you're single and you're looking for a cute dude, go to the dog park.
I agree. There's a lot of cute women there too.
Yeah. And just like if a guy can take care of a dog well, I feel like that's a good indicator that he's a good man, or at least he's borderline responsible.
I agree. 100%.
Right?
I may be biased.
Yeah, unless their dog's like disheveled and like untrained, then maybe that's another thing to look into. But yeah, so your brand is really about dating and kind of like you kind of have this like kind of heartbreak element to it, and you're showing like the real side of dating, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a sad boy element to it. I'm 33, so I've had about 13 years, give or take, of dating in New York City, a lot of ups and downs. So what I've done is compiled all of those experiences and portray them in like comedic light on my social media because I feel like everyone can relate for the most part.
It's very relatable.
Yeah.
Well, specifically today, we'll talk about dating, quite often with Matt, but today we're going to talk about dating apps because it's kind of the new wave of dating in general. And a little backstory, I was divorced. I was on Bumble before I met my ex-husband. So I had a little bit of that experience, but then you go 7 years in a relationship and then you get back out into it. And I feel like everybody knows how to navigate the, online dating scene. And there's a bit of a learning curve, no? Like,
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's a lot of options, first of all, but not only that, you have to portray yourself in a specific way.
Yeah.
Each app has a different vibe, but it's definitely challenging.
Do you feel like it is difficult to come across as yourself on dating apps, or is it more of like a misinterpretation? Like, what is the best way to kind of, I guess, showcase the real you on a dating app?
I think dating apps are inherently fairly superficial. Like you want to portray the best, version of you to folks, whether that's photos or like being witty in prompts. It's honestly challenging. I've put my dating app profiles up for review on my social media.
Oh, okay.
And I've gotten dragged. Like they're, not
What's the worst critique?
enough, like creepy photos, prompts that, are a little too, a little too self-centered.
Wait, have I ever critiqued your dating app?
You should. I'm always looking for advice
because
it clearly hasn't worked. But yeah, I think for me, I'm trying to use more authentic photos that portray me in a more realistic light. And also the prompts, just really giving insight into who I am truly as a person and what I'm looking for in another individual instead of trying to be like overly smart or funny or witty because,
Yeah. Well, what dating apps are you on? Because there's a ton.
So I've used most of them throughout my life. I've narrowed it down right now to Hinge and Raya.
Okay. Are those what you feel like are the best?
So Hinge is probably my favorite, given they have many prompts, so you could get.
Is that the one where like you're connected with people who know you, or there's like?
That was the original intent of the app, probably 13 years ago.
That's when I was.
It has since changed to anyone can join, and there's no mutual relationship.
I only did Bumble way back in the day, and then I've been on Raya, but not actively. I mean, now I have a boyfriend, but like when I was dating, I technically met him on Raya, but really it was more of like he saw me on Raya, was like, oh, she's single now. It was kind of like a flag, but not actually actively using it. And I think because I get a little intimidated by that whole process of like putting yourself out there and trying to create this like online persona that's accurate. When you're doing social media as you do for a living, right? Or part of a living.
Hopefully
full time. But when you're doing social media in that way, you are actively trying to present yourself in a certain way as like a brand. But then when you're on your dating profile, there's these like mixed signals of like you have to present yourself as a brand in this curated version of yourself. But in reality, you do want to meet someone who loves you for you. So how do you navigate like setting up a profile that is accurate about who you are, but also enticing enough for someone to want to like swipe right and talk to you.
Yeah. I think for me in the photos, I look for like them in a natural state, them out doing things that they like to do. So you get some perception on what their interests are.
Yeah.
Prompts on Hinge are pretty detailed. So you can, really showcase your personality and your interests and what you're looking for in a partner, which I like. Other apps less so, like Raya is more photo based. There's not as much of a descriptive element of it. Yeah, it has that, reputation as being exclusive. But, at the end of the day, you need to give someone just enough to pique their interest so that you can actually just go on a date and meet and learn, firsthand.
Well, so the premise of this podcast as the It Girls Guide is to kind of give advice, right? So in terms of your experience on dating apps, what is something that I guess a woman could put in her profile that's going to intrigue you, maybe tell us a story, and then also something that maybe you see women putting on their profiles that maybe they think is a good thing, but is actually a turnoff?
I think just first and foremost, don't try too hard. I see a lot of photos that are like heavily curated. It doesn't really tell me what they're really like.
What do you mean by heavily curated? You mean like they look really posed or edited?
Posed, edited in like a really like sceney place, just trying to look cool.
Yeah.
But I'd prefer to see you doing something that you're interested in, or you, even with friends, I know there's, some issues there because you can't determine who the actual person is.
So
but as like
your first picture has to be just you.
Yeah, just you smiling, maybe just something natural and, in your element. So just don't try too hard. It's, obvious to me. I'm sure people would say this about my profile too. It's a work in progress, but
I'm going to put you on the spot.
And then just, just being yourself in terms of how you answer their captions. I see a lot of people just not really, they try to be too witty.
You have so much time to curate what you're going to say to make like the perfect response. Then you'll be talking to someone on an app and you're like, oh, he's so witty. And then you meet them in person. You're like, oh, you were only witty because you had 3 hours to figure out a witty response and maybe collectively come up with something with your friends before you say anything to me. And then in real life, you're like kind of a dud.
I think expressing like true elements of your personality and your interests are better talking points to build off of, as opposed to like some witty statement that might lead you to like some banter. But I think banter is best established, like you said, in person.
And do you like to talk to people on the app for a while before? Like I think in my profile, it said something about like, I don't want a pen pal, because you start to talk to someone. And again, it's really easy to be witty and engaging when you have time to curate a response. But I would just want to be like, let's go have drinks. Let's immediately go and have drinks or go to dinner. Actually, I usually don't like to have dinner because you want to have
It's harder to bail.
Yeah. Coffee, a walk, something. I always have like an out on like the first date to just like go and see, because someone online is a much different version of themselves than like who's actually in front of you.
It has to be drinks or a walk or coffee. Dinner's too much. Like
too much. Yeah. Especially in New York, it's freaking expensive.
You want to know the best out?
What is it?
Just say you have diarrhea and walk away. Like they'll never text you again. It's guaranteed.
Truly, I will say across the board, it's like the same thing if you call out of like work or something. If you say you have diarrhea, no one's going to ask
no questions asked.
No one's have a follow-up question.
Do your thing, girl. You can go home and then you'll never hear from them again.
I thought you were going to say you have a dog, because I use Puck as my excuse. He's out of frame right now, but he is always watching and he is in the room. He's taking a nap.
You could say my dog has diarrhea if you don't want to throw yourself under the bus.
I'm always like, oh, my dog eats dinner at X time. I got to go back because I'm a responsible dog mom. Okay, so I want to know, I mean, I probably already know this answer, but I want you to tell some stories. A story, maybe not necessarily a catfish, like physical catfish, but where like you were really into someone. What did their profile look like versus like you met them in person and were disappointed or were surprised by who they actually were as a person? I mean, when I was on like the dating apps, I would get a lot of responses from people in person being like, oh, you look like your photos. And again, I had like friends who had been on the dating app scene for a while who did help me make my profile. And I was like, okay, I need to use some, their advice was all, okay, you can have one photo that's like, not edited, but like you all like dolled up, but you got to have very like candid photos so someone can see, not like you posed in kind of like a headshot, but you laughing with your friends and something natural, but have you ever experienced someone like you thought they were like great on their profile and then in person you were like, oh, things aren't lining up?
I think in terms of physical appearance, I know we're not starting there, but like that's always checked out because it's kind of hard to, not get away with that now.
Was now all the apps are like connected to your social media, so it's kind of hard.
I've heard through my female friends that they've gone out with men who like posted photos from like 20 years ago.
Yeah, that has happened to me.
So I feel like it happens more with us men perceiving ourselves incorrectly. Or portraying ourselves incorrectly. However, no, for me, it's more of a personality mismatch. Like people can be really witty and outgoing via text when whatever they're typing is calculated. But I've gone on dates with like extreme introverts. It's nothing on them, but it was just like tough to have conversation because they were so reclusive and I don't know, they might have been anxious, who knows? But those dates tend to be tough, especially if I have to carry the conversation because I'm inherently more introverted as well. I like some like equal level of back and forth there and questions. I don't want to talk at you.
Well, what would you suggest a woman should put in their profile to like, I guess, come across as engaging? Not to say that they're gonna like catfish you in that way as well, but like something that someone would put in their profile or show in their profile that would stand out to be something different than the others.
I like specific details about the person, not generic things. Like there's a lot of people I see who like it'll be like typical Sunday and it'll be like brunch. And I'm like, can we elaborate here?
Yeah, everybody goes to brunch.
What's your favorite food at brunch? Like just something to give me some level of detail to know that we have a basis of compatibility or at least mutual interest.
You're saying, oh, I like brunch. What if I'm like, I'm not vegan. I don't want to use that scenario because that has other connotations. But like
that would definitely filter some people out.
Yeah, that would filter some people out, right? But if you're more specific and you're like, oh, well, like I love brunch, but not a boozy brunch. Like I tend to like a nice brunch after church and I do X, Y, and Z. Like be more specific and it's going to weed some people out. But like if you just say, oh, I love brunch on a Sunday, you might get a bunch of people who like to do a party brunch versus a post-church brunch versus like a nice brunch with a coffee and a walk around. I don't know. I mean, that's a, very generic version of that. But I think the terminology of just like casting a wider net versus like a small net. Do you think you try to cast a wide net or a small net?
Medium net. Like I want to leave something up for interpretation. But for instance, I talk about like what I look for in a partner, like intellectual curiosity, self-awareness. Like these are really important to me at this age. Yeah. And someone who can't even resonate with that from the jump.
For the context, how old are you?
Generic. I'm 33.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't prioritize those things, like it's probably not going to work out in terms of long-term growth together.
Yeah.
I mentioned that I love cooking a specific dish and like care about cooking for people that I love. Like
you've cooked for me. He's a good cook.
Yeah. So like things like that where we can maybe have mutual interest of food or cooking, just something like at least base level to build off of.
Yeah.
And then I think it's like what's your karaoke song? And I said like a Creed song. Yeah. So someone knows who Creed is and will sing Butt Rock with me. Yeah. A karaoke bar. Like that's a win-win. It's not a must have, but
people like to put themselves in a position to be liked in a certain way, or they think common interest is what's going to connect them with someone. But for example, if you really love to hike, right? Or love to camp. My boyfriend loves to camp. Like he wants to be outside in the wilderness, sleeping on the ground, sitting outside is all I can think about.
Sounds right up your alley.
Right?
Come on.
I do not want to do that. I grew up fishing and stuff. I'm from Louisiana. I can do all that. But I like to say I hung up my hat. I hung up my shrimp boots. I don't want to do that anymore. But I don't have to portray myself as someone who likes doing all those things in order to be with a person who enjoys those things. I think he appreciates that. Oh, I love that he does that for himself. I don't want to be a part of it. So he can go off and do that on his own and I'll stay at the spa. And that's great as long as I support it. So I think, I guess this is me giving the It Girls advice, that you don't have to have all the same interests as someone for them to be interested in you. So if a guy has like a bunch of hiking photos, it doesn't mean you have to talk and be like, oh, I just love going on hikes on the weekend. No, you don't. That's something he can maybe continue to do with his friends, and you don't have to do that.
I'm looking for baseline compatibility. It doesn't need to be like a perfect match on a dating app, but enough to build off something on a first date. I don't know.
There's probably a handful of deal breakers. Like if they don't like dogs, that's not going to work.
Oh, 100%.
But if they don't love like emo, screamo music, like you do, that's okay.
No, that's rare. That's like a 5% hit rate. on dates.
I'm outing him. Okay, he's got a weird taste in music.
I was in an emo band, Johnny on the Spot. Find us on MySpace. I think our
Is
songs
MySpace
are still
still
up.
like an active?
I think you could still find our profile on MySpace. I don't know if the audio files still work, but
Okay, I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that. He had a different era.
it's also
right?
synonymous with a Porta-John company. We didn't realize that when we made the name Johnny on the
Oh.
Spot. So if we were still around today, we'd likely have a different name. There might be some copyright infringement there.
That's an interesting. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you to kind of break bro code a little bit. When it comes to how the conversations you have with guys, give us like kind of the inside scoop on what are guys looking for when not just in dating profiles necessarily, but in dating in general. Because we as women, we always are kind of like going to each other to get advice, but it's really it's not the same for me to tell my friend, oh, I think you should have photos like this. Maybe I'm telling you based off of what has worked for me personally, but I'm a much different person than maybe the friends that I'm giving this advice to. But if from the receiving end, as a man, like what are you and your friends talking about when it comes to like dating apps to dating and those conversations behind the scenes?
So if you asked me this question 10 years ago, it would be very superficial, and it would mostly be,
Well, we have a wide age range, so like
she's hot, she's fun.
Yeah, that's all you're looking for.
Lock her in for a 3-month situationship kind of vibe.
Yeah.
At age 33, not so much.
So men do mature in terms of their conversation.
We do. And a lot of my friends are married with kids now.
Yeah.
The ones that are single, they're just looking for like really down to earth women who are sure of themselves, who respect each other's time, who are empathetic, emotionally intelligent, intellectually curious, like just really awesome fundamental traits that could lead to a sustainable long-term partnership where that has caused me to become far more picky, and why even my casual relationships have decreased like 10x since even when I was in my late 20s, because I really don't want to waste my energy. And you were a big proponent of this because I was with certain people.
I had some opinions about people he was dating.
And I've been I've been in...
Like, why are you wasting your time? We're spending that much energy. And look, I am someone who I believe in the value of situationships, the value of friends with benefits. I think that they have a place in society and in relationships, but it depends on what you're looking for, right? I think if you're trying to convince yourself that you are fine being casual when what you really want is a long-term relationship, you're going to get to an impasse with yourself internally and also with whatever relationships you're kind of going through. And I think what a lot of women start to find with men is like they'll meet someone on a dating app. Like I will say maybe his profile says he's looking for something serious, and then they're on a date and they say that, oh, I'm just looking around. I'm not really sure if I want something serious. I have a lot going on in my life, but sometimes that's not so accurate. But you're saying from a guy's perspective, once you get to a certain age, you guys also do kind of have not the same biological clock as women, but your friends are getting married, your friends are settling down, and you're starting to change your criteria for women that you're dating, but also the standard of the type of relationship you're having.
Yeah. I think the more self-work you can do in understanding your patterns that drive your behavior will alleviate a lot of the problems that you may encounter in dating. Like me personally, when I wasn't in tune with myself, not comfortable within myself, I was attracting situations that would feed into those patterns and exacerbate these like negative emotional feelings. And the more I've just been comfortable being independent and understanding that, my reality is ultimately up to me, that's when I've encountered a lot better quality people in dating.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't work out, I'm in such a good place that it doesn't really faze me. And usually they end more amicably. So I always say with dating, like you can't date as a distraction or a need for external fulfillment or validation or happiness. It has to come from within. And when you square that away, the rest becomes a lot easier, and you won't be beholden or affected by the many subpar mediocre men in the city, which was like basically me in my entire 20s. So
I'm glad you're owning that, because dating in the city is a bit hard. I think, when I'm from Louisiana, right? There's a lot more, people settle down a lot earlier. So people are getting into serious relationships a lot earlier. But in the city, everyone's out and about and you're having a good time. So it's a lot harder, especially in your 20s, to lock down any sort of a relationship, because there's kind of this revolving door or, the bigger, better deal. I'd love to know your thoughts on how social media for one, but also the dating app culture has affected actual relationships, right? Because my boyfriend now, he's 40, right? So he is, I mean, he used the apps and whatnot, but he's still kind of removed from like the tech of it all. And we've had that conversation about how dating online feels really overwhelming because there's like kind of too many options. And I think a lot of women that I talk to have that same perspective of I think women are, for the most part, when you're on an app, you're looking for a partnership, right? And our feeling, I'm speaking for all women at this point, and I know this is not across the board, but the general consensus is that there's this level of anxiety knowing, okay, I'm going on a date with this guy, but I know he's been swiping to a bunch of other people and I'm going to leave this date with him and he's going to go and look and compare. And maybe he's been on 2 other dates this week, and how that, I'm curious, like a man's perspective on how that affects your dating life in general.
Yeah, modern dating is extremely challenging, and you've hit on some key points. I think if you think of our grandparents, they dated the people on their block.
Literally.
My parents, same school, same place of work, like same bar. Now there's unlimited options, and it creates this false perception of,
you can like meet someone in a different country at this point and match with them on an app. It's wild.
Yeah, Raya just serving me like, oh, this.
I'm like, I'm never gonna meet this
here's
guy.
Mary from Zurich, Switzerland. I'm like, oh, this is definitely not gonna work out, but we'll match anyways. So I think that creates this cycle of endless opportunity to fulfill short-term validation through casual hookups and casual intimacy, casual energy exchanges.
And not wanting to work through something because you feel like, oh, well, there's a problem here. Oh, I don't want to deal with that problem. I'll just start fresh.
Exactly. As soon as the challenging part inevitably comes, which is required to cultivate any long-term relationship, it's much easier to jump ship and repeat the cycle over again. Because let's be real, like those early days of dating, it's fun. Like you still have the puppy love. The neurochemicals are flowing freely.
Yeah.
And then when that dies down, you just chase the next best thing. But ultimately, I think that's a shallow pursuit in the long run, because it's not as fulfilling as if you were to cultivate really deep, meaningful, long-term relationships, which has, been a challenge for me. I historically was the one who was engaging intentionally in the short-term cycle. Yeah. And since, shifting to being more open to the long-term potential, I've had women who I've dated who everything about it was great and it seemed like a relationship. And as soon as it was time to commit, they were like, no. And they may have given me signs, and maybe I was just blissfully ignorant about them. But like it's on both sides now. I've seen it from both ends.
I think too, as you get older, because you said you're 33, I'm 31. I think at this phase in life, dating, the stakes are higher, right? When you're like 22, 23, 24 and you're dating, you're like, I might only date this person for a couple years and then it'll fizzle out or whatever it is. And when you get into dating in your 30s, you kind of are dating to marry, right? Yeah. And then you said the stakes are higher. When you're making a decision to date someone, I feel this way, and I'm going to record an episode soon about like dating like a divorcee, but since the stakes are higher, if I commit to this person, also backing out of a relationship is harder, right? You make the commitment and you're saying, I'm dating you to like test the waters to see if like we could be together forever. And then you start, like I said, you don't necessarily want to jump ship at the first sign of some sort of hardship, but then you start to think, oh, is this real hardship that would affect our long-term relationship, or is this just a blip? And then you start to, this happened to me, and you move in with someone, or you start a business with someone, or your lives start to intertwine, and then it's a lot more difficult to unravel a life that you've like built with someone. So the stakes are a lot higher, right?
Yeah.
Which complicates things.
And that pressure is what also pushes a lot of people away prematurely. For me, I'm definitely open to that. But if someone's on a first date and like they're like, I want to have a kid in 2 years, I'm like, that doesn't align with my timeline. So it's better to be upfront and honest. Yeah. And like those questions won't scare the right person. Usually it just detracts more immature like people who are probably going to use you for short-term validation.
So that's a thing to talk about for dating in general, and especially in this like app culture that's very kind of flippant at times, is direct communication and honesty. When I'm talking to my girlfriends and I'm like, maybe because I was out of the dating game for so long, I just don't have the tolerance for the game playing and all of that. But I'll have friends send me screenshots of like their text with a guy and going back and forth, and they'll say, okay, well, how do I respond to this? Or like, I'm like, well, what are you trying to say? And they'll tell me, and I say that. Say exactly that. Do you find that women are kind of trying to beat around the bush more often, or that you respond better to people who are being more direct? Because I always say, like, if you know you're dating to marry and you want a kid in 2 years, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that on a first date. And not in a way of, because you're not saying, I want to have a kid with you in 2 years. You're saying, this is my like kind of timeline. This is what I'm looking for. And if there's a straight up, just flat out no, then you know not to waste each other's time.
Yeah, communication and upfront is important at this stage, and also just understanding your communication styles. Like if someone from day one is like, I'm not the best texter, that may give you an understanding of why they may not be responding in a timely manner. Yeah. But if that's not something you want to deal with, then you don't have to settle for that. You can find someone who does communicate more frequently.
Yeah.
I'm always direct. Like I don't play games anymore. Mm-hmm. It's
Do you feel like that's something that you grew out of just with age, or with like, because you've done a lot of work on yourself, you've done therapy, and like you, I think, are a more emotionally evolved man, and at bare minimum in terms of your communication style. Like, do you feel like that's something that came with just age and wanting things differently, or?
For me, probably.
Or learning the hard way.
Immense suffering that prompted finally introspection that led to
so learning the hard way.
So I think learning the hard way. I don't think it naturally occurs.
Yeah.
With age, because I have some friends who are like late 20s who date men in their 40s who are like like man childs.
Yeah.
So,
I call it Peter Pan syndrome.
Yeah. Like, why are you still single?
And then it becomes very obvious.
Yeah. Hope that doesn't become me.
No. I believe you're
I'll just get a bunch more dogs if all else fails.
That wouldn't be the worst thing. I think that's my backup plan, right? Like Puck is on the floor. He's dreaming. I think he's like running in his sleep right now. We could have 10 of you, and I'd love it. That's my game plan too. If all else fails, I'm going to live on a farm with a bunch of dogs. And I think
I'll join you.
Yeah, it's totally fine. We'll just
I'll be your domestic partner.
We'll just have like a community, right? And just have like maybe 30 to 40 dogs, but like on a large farm, they can all run around. Okay, back to dating. So, so when it comes to, the male perspective on all of this, how do you feel about, I guess, like the game playing we're talking about, right? Like, do you feel like when you're on dates, there is more of are you seeing more of this element of game playing from women, or do you feel like it's more on the man side, or like both? Is it a maturity thing? Like, what is the kind of trend you're seeing when you're going out on dates?
I don't think it's exclusive to a specific gender.
Yeah.
I think it's just maturity.
Yeah.
And also like sincerity around what your actual intentions are. If you're, if you're not seriously looking for something, and you're playing games, usually you can gather that they're not interested. So you should just move on. If a man is interested in you as a woman, he will make a plan, and it'll likely be even on the first date, if not right after. Yeah. And it's like, not like,
if he wanted to, he would.
It's not like, what are you up to? It's like, hey, I'd love to see you again. I had a great first date. When are you free next week? Okay, Tuesday, great. We spoke about X, Y, and Z. I know you like this food. I'll make a reservation here. Does that time work? It's not that hard. Like that. And people, like women that I date who are like immediately down, like that's how I know we're vibing. Yeah. And if they're, lackluster and like, we'll catch up in a couple weeks, like, not to invest as much time there.
Fair enough. Have you had the experience where you're super confident and into someone and you're doing that and they're not responding? And how do you react in that situation? Of like, do you take the hint, or do you keep trying, or what's the deal? Because
this literally just happened to me. I had an incredible first date with someone. She's awesome, like nothing against her, but I think I perceived it in a way where the connection may have been stronger than it was. So I was gung ho about, making plans that we had already discussed. And when I followed up, like there wasn't the same reciprocal energy there. And I, 5 years ago would have made me incredibly anxious. I probably would have like latched on too hard and then pushed that person away.
Personally, to some degree.
This anxious attachment would come out, but now you just got to accept it. Like, it's nothing that they did wrong. Everything you perceive is a reflection of you. So just, go back inward and realize that
Yeah.
You had a great first date. Be grateful for that. It may not turn into anything.
Yeah.
And just surrender. Let's
Because
see how
I've
it
heard
plays
this
out.
phrase a bunch, which I won't say who told me because I'm going to like out him, but he would say like persistence wears down resistance, which I think is something like I've experienced with men in the past of like, because women and men are different. I think men will meet a woman and they know whether or not they're attracted to them from like the first date. And women can sometimes like have the ability to warm up to someone. So maybe there's a guy who like you weren't that interested in, but then like they keep showing you that like they want to put you first and keep going after it. So how do you ever like navigate that part of it of just like, oh, I'm going to reach out again because I want to really prove to her that I'm interested in just her? Because I see from like the dating side of like, I know when, I mean, I'm not actively like out dating now, but when I was, like, again, we know like the swiping and whatnot. There was a part of me, I would be lying if I didn't say this, that wanted to know, oh, they are just out for me and I want to be like the one person they're after versus, being one of many and knowing, okay, he asked me out once, made a pretty easy plan. Maybe I was actually just busy that time, but if they didn't ever follow up, that's happened to me where I actually was busy and I said, I can't do that on Thursday, but like, like let's try something else. And they never followed up. And I'm like, damn, like you really gave up pretty quickly.
That probably is more illustrative of them not being as interested as you.
Yeah, as I originally perceived.
Like I will follow up. I'm not ashamed to
Yeah.
double text in certain instances.
Yeah.
Really don't care. So if you want something, go for it in
Yeah.
like a respectful manner. You don't want to like blow up someone's phone, but
yeah. Don't be that guy.
I'll do like maybe one double text and give it some
Yeah.
time. And if there's no response, I just let it go.
I always say like trust your gut because and I think the gut is something and like intuition is something you can kind of like hone in on. But I do think that when there's certain connections, right? Like when I first met my boyfriend, we're still long distance, but we were just communicating via text and FaceTime and we were trying to figure out how to see each other. And the first time we saw each other in person was actually me going to him. I was flying in, I was stopping through Florida and I said, my gut is telling me that like he hasn't not come to fly to see me because he's not interested. He truly is busy. So I called him up and I was like, I'm in Florida. I'm only an hour away from where you are. Like, can we just do this? If not, no harm, no foul, but let's just go for it. It was coming from like my gut telling me, okay, this person isn't avoiding me. Yeah. He's not playing games. He's actually interested. And I think, you can kind of hone in on that like gut thing. When you're having that, like you said, anxious attachment and oh, you want to keep reaching out just because you're feeling like you want the validation versus sometimes as a woman, you do kind of have to meet someone halfway and you might have to cancel some plans to go on move your plans around to go on a date with someone who you really think might be a viable match, right?
I think when in doubt, just ask him. Ask him
outright. Be direct.
I appreciate that, and it'll reveal so much because it gives them an out if they're not interested, and a lot of times they'll take it, and then and then you can move on. But if they are interested, it validates security as opposed to anxiety, and you could progress accordingly. And that example I alluded to, where I was looking forward to the second date, and I sensed that person was withdrawing. I just straight up asked them like, "Hey, I sense you withdrawing. Like, just want to reiterate, no expectations here. Just had a great first date. Love to see you again. Like, what are you thinking?"
I think that's a great way to put it. I think as women, we feel, we want to be courted, right? And there's this a little bit of an element of like being nervous to put ourselves out there. But I always say like part of dating and being in love and getting to experience that is letting yourself be vulnerable to a degree. So like if you really like a guy and he's not, you're kind of maybe having a misconnection and trying to coordinate and whatnot. I think just on the flip side of how you handle that situation, just be able to ask directly and say, hey, I know we've been having trouble scheduling a date, but I'm really interested in you and I'm really interested in getting to know you more. Like, I just want to make that clear. And if then he continues or doesn't, continues to dodge the date or doesn't reciprocate that at least verbal confirmation or text confirmation, then like you can take that hint. But I think putting yourself out there a little bit and getting that direct answer is better than trying to decipher all their little like nuances, especially with someone you're dating newly and you don't necessarily know what their standard communication style is. Like if you're dating someone who has a relatively busy day job where they're attached to a computer and then they can't be texting you all day, when your experience has been with someone who has maybe a more flexible schedule and you might be interpreting it in a different way. I think just being direct.
It's never too early to communicate. And if you are communicating directly and the person's not reciprocating, it's probably not going to work out.
Cut your losses at that point.
Yeah. So you have nothing to lose. At the end of the day, if you know that you're good in your own, you don't need no mans.
We don't need no man.
You'll eventually find someone that just feels comfortable.
Being comfortable, I think when you first meet someone, you can get that kind of energy. Although I do say you need 90 days to really know someone. So don't
3-month rule, baby.
Yeah. Don't get attached to someone you're dating before the 90 days because you're still getting to know them. They're still, you're still getting to know each other, right? And you're figuring out those like nuances. And someone can hold their shit together for 90 days, but day 91, things start to unravel and you get to see the real parts of them. And that's not to say that everybody should be perfect, but my mom calls it the tax, that everybody has their flaws, everybody has their like idiosyncrasies, and you get to decide with whoever you end up with, is the tax worth it, right? If maybe they have some weird habits, or maybe they are a bit introverted and take a little bit of time to get, information out of them or to get to know them. But if that's a tax that you're willing to pay to get to know someone or to love someone, like go for it. But then some taxes are not worth it. A guy who's flip-floppy and maybe has a wandering eye, not a tax I'm willing to deal with, but someone who maybe is, not able to be as communicative because they're really focused on their career so they can build a family and support a family. Like I can take that tax.
Just beware of, I don't know what I'm looking for.
That phrase.
Yeah, if you get that, run.
You should know what you're looking for, especially if you're dating in your 30s.
Yeah.
By this point, we should all know what we're looking for. And if they say that,
I mean, if you're looking for a booty call, so be it. Just be honest.
Then say that.
Yeah, because sometimes people are down. I've had some good casual relationships that have resulted in strong friendships.
I say this all the time to guys. I'm like, if you want to have a casual relationship, just say that. I think a lot of women out there are open to that as well. Where we get tripped up is thinking that they want something more and then trying to navigate that, when I say to guys all the time, if you just told her from the jump, and then maybe you do act like a boyfriend and then you just got to reiterate, I know we've been hanging out in this way and we've been cuddling and we've been doing this and that, but we're just friends and that's how I want to keep it. Have to like kind of like check in. I do think there's a healthy way. We're going to have to come back and have an episode about healthy ways of having friends with benefits and situationships. But for now, it's just about dating.
A lot of experience with the healthy casual relationships.
Yes. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, Matt, for being here. If you want to follow him and his dating advice and dating stories, you have like a lot of good stories on your social channels.
Yep. Matthew.Tamasi on Instagram and TikTok. I'll be launching my own podcast soon called The Opposite Sex with an amazing co-host. More to come there. But in the meantime, really appreciate you having me on.
Yes, thank you. And the girls appreciate the male perspective, I think, as well. So thank you for being here.
Awesome.
We'll be back soon.
Bye.
Bye.